They say the past is never truly gone. It lingers, a silent shadow waiting for a moment to resurface. For years, I carried a weight, a decision I made, words I uttered, actions I can't undo. It began as a minor rift, a misunderstanding that I could have fixed, but I let my pride take over. That decision wasn't just a mistake. It was a fracture that widened until it swallowed a friendship whole. And while life moved on, a part of me remained trapped in the guilt of that moment. I thought I could forget, but the memory never faded. I'd see their name in my contacts, feel the sting of regret when someone mentioned their achievements, and hear their laugh in my dreams, a laugh I hadn't heard in years. It was the kind of guilt that doesn't fade. It grows roots and weaves itself into your soul.
It was so long ago, but I remember the day as if it were yesterday. We were standing in a crowded room, voices echoing, yet the only sound I remember is my own, sharp, unforgiving, and cruel. I lashed out, my words cutting deeper than I realized. It wasn't just anger, it was frustration, jealousy, and insecurity boiling over. They stood there, stunned, their face a mixture of hurt and disbelief. I told myself they deserved it, but deep down I knew they didn't. What hurt the most wasn't their silence, it was their eyes. Those eyes that once held trust and understanding now reflected something foreign, disappointment. I turned my back, thinking I'd won some invisible battle, but in reality I'd lost something invaluable. After that day, silence became my companion. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. I told myself they'd reach out if they cared, but deep down I knew the truth. I'd pushed them away. Each passing moment felt heavier, the silence louder. I replayed our conversations, our laughs, and the memories of better days. But no matter how many times I tried to justify my actions, the guilt gnawed at me. It wasn't just about what I'd said, it was about what I hadn't done. I hadn't apologized. I hadn't tried to make things right. And as time stretched on, the idea of reaching out became more daunting. What would I say? Would they even listen?
Years later, I reached my breaking point. It wasn't a grand moment or a life-altering event. It was a quiet evening, sitting alone with nothing but my thoughts. I realized I couldn't move forward while holding on to the past. The guilt had taken up too much space in my heart, and the only way to release it was to confront it. I picked up my phone, trembling. My heart raced as I typed their name. It had been years. What if they didn't respond? What if they hated me? But for the first time, I cared less about their response and more about saying what I needed to say. After pressing send, I was left with nothing but silence. It was a silence that seemed louder than any noise I had ever heard. My mind raced with every possible scenario. What if they ignored me? What if they responded with anger? Or worse, what if they had completely forgotten me? Each minute felt like an eternity, and with every passing second, I doubted myself more. I thought back to all the moments we had shared, every laugh, every secret, and every time they had been there for me when no one else was. Those memories were a stark contrast to the person I had been on that fateful day, the person who had pushed them away. And now I was left wondering if those moments meant as much to them as they did to me, or if they had simply moved on without a second thought. As I waited, the memories came flooding back. It was as though my mind had decided to open a vault I had kept tightly shut for years. I remembered the late-night conversations, the silly inside jokes, and the times we had leaned on each other when the world felt too heavy. But those memories weren't just a source of comfort. They were a stark reminder of what I had lost. I also remembered the fallout, the days after our fight when I pretended I didn't care. I had told myself that I was better off, that I didn't need them in my life. But those lies I told myself felt hollow now. The truth was, I missed them. I missed the friendship, the connection, and the trust. And now I could only hope that it wasn't too late to rebuild what I had broken. When the reply finally came, it was like the world had paused for a moment. My heart pounded as I opened the message, my hands trembling slightly. It was a simple response. I've thought about you too. Let's talk. Those words carried more weight than I could have imagined. They were not angry, not dismissive, just an opening, a chance to reconnect. Relief washed over me, but it was accompanied by a new wave of nerves. What would I say? How would I explain the years of silence, the pain I had caused? The message was the beginning of something, but it also meant that I would have to face the consequences of my actions head on. I typed out a response, my fingers moving almost mechanically. Can we call? I want to explain everything. It was a simple message, but it carried the weight of years of unspoken words. When they agreed, my heart raced. This wasn't just about texting back and forth. It was about hearing their voice for the first time in years.
When the call connected, there was a moment of silence on both ends, a silence filled with unspoken emotions. Then I heard their voice, and it was like no time had passed. "Hey," they said, their tone cautious but not unkind. I took a deep breath, knowing this was my moment to finally say what I had been holding back for so long. As the conversation began, I realized how much time had passed and how much had changed between us. But the hurt and the tension from years ago were still there, lingering beneath the surface. "I've waited for this call," they said, their voice steady yet tinged with vulnerability. Their words hit me harder than I expected.
I confessed everything, how I had been too proud to apologize back then, how I had convinced myself that avoiding them was easier than facing what I'd done. "I was selfish," I said, my voice breaking. "I didn't think about how much I hurt you. I just wanted to protect myself." Saying it out loud made the weight of my actions feel even heavier, but it also felt like a step toward healing. When I finished speaking, the silence that followed felt heavier than before. Then they began to speak, and for the first time, I truly listened. They told me about the pain I had caused, the confusion and betrayal they had felt when I pulled away. "You weren't just my friend, you were my anchor," they said. "When you left, it felt like I was drifting, and I didn't know why." Hearing their side of the story was like peeling back a layer I had refused to look at before. It hurt to realize how deeply I had affected them, but it was also what I needed to hear. Their words were honest and raw, and I knew they weren't trying to punish me. They just wanted me to understand. "I never stopped caring about you," they said, and those words shattered something inside me. I realized that despite everything, they still valued the friendship we once had. It was a moment of unexpected grace, a reminder that forgiveness, though difficult, was not impossible. I apologized again, this time with more sincerity and specificity. I acknowledged the moments I had dismissed their feelings, the times I had let my pride get in the way, and the ways I had avoided accountability. For the first time, I felt like I was speaking from a place of true humility. We started talking about the good times, the moments that had defined our friendship before everything fell apart. It was a way of reminding ourselves why we had cared so much in the first place. "Do you remember that road trip?" they asked, laughing softly. "The one where we got lost for hours but ended up having the best time?" It felt like we were piecing together a broken vase, carefully placing each shard back in its rightful place. The cracks were still visible, but the shape was recognizable, and that was enough. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope that we could rebuild what we had lost. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," they said, their tone thoughtful, "but it means we can try to move forward." Those words stayed with me long after the call ended. Forgiveness wasn't a reset button. It was a process, one that would require effort from both of us. I promised to do better, to show through my actions that I had changed. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had been given a second chance, and I wasn't going to waste it. The conversation stayed with me for days, echoing in my mind like a song on repeat. I couldn't stop thinking about their words, the pain I had caused, the trust I had shattered, and the unexpected grace they had extended to me. I realized that apologizing wasn't enough. Words could only go so far. It was time to take action, to show through my choices that I was truly committed to making things right. I started small. I made an effort to check in with them regularly, to ask how they were doing, and truly listen to their answers. I began to be more mindful in all my relationships, paying attention to how my actions and words affected the people around me. Slowly, I felt the walls I had built up inside myself begin to crumble. For the first time in years, I wasn't running away from my mistakes. I was facing them. Months passed, and our conversations became more frequent, more natural. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of awkwardness, still remnants of the pain I had caused. But there was also something new, a sense of understanding, a fragile but growing trust. Forgiveness, I learned, isn't a single act. It's a journey, one that requires patience, humility, and constant effort. And as much as I wanted their forgiveness, I realized that I also needed to forgive myself. For years, I had carried the weight of my mistakes like a burden I couldn't set down. But now, for the first time, I felt lighter. As I looked back on everything, I realized that the hardest part wasn't apologizing, it was facing the truth about who I had been. But in doing so, I found something I never expected, a chance to become someone better.